Lee had spent a surprisingly large portion of his engineering career in the North. And for that reason, he understood clearly that the South was too woefully under resourced to accomplish any kind of great military triumph. If the Confederates were to win their independence, they'd have to get in and score a quick knockout. And the way to do that was to leap to the offensive, surprise the North, carry the war north, make war on Northern public opinion, convince Northerners that they could not win, and thus force the Lincoln administration to the negotiating table.
Creates his signature move, the Dempsey double shift. Every punch Jack threw was thrown for power.
His left whipped in tirelessly enough. The blows miss or graze Willard. Dempsey hasn't the range yet.
By dropping his weight and stepping in with each foot as he punched, he keeps Willard on defense as he closes the gap.
What else can he do against the endlessly moving little man? But try as he will, it's far beyond Big Jet. For all the charging, for all the blows.
Crossing the beach minefield and getting close enough to drop Jess for the first time. The remains of the round is the filthiest beating in boxing. Jess Willard looked like a baby deer learning to walk in a ring with a wolverine. Made all the worse by the fact that Jack was under no obligation to move to a neutral corner after a knockdown. So Jack Dempsey stood there, daring the big man to rise as he stepped around the referee to get to Willard's back. Any predator knows the best place to attack is from behind.
The instant Willard leader up and board back at him again. Jess is wide open. He has absolutely no defense. And he hits the leg again. Curry just...
It was a round in the genre of horror. Jess Willard was knocked down 7 times, and because he was a champion, he got up 8.
Right and left into it. Clear across the outside corner. And there he takes it again. Out from the man standing. There he falls, gloved hand feeling to the rope, trying to hold himself up. The right smashes into his side. Other right cracks to the head, and Willard collapses into a sitting position, dazed.
Now he's bouncing better. Almost falls out the ring. Very even fight. Ali, a sneaky right hand. Another sneaky right hand. This time he works over the shoulder a moment. It's a combination.
Real trouble. And Joe Frazier is pretty stunned too. A wicked punch there.
Scuffle in this round. And down to the bell. Up to Nuno. Well, that's better. That's the best round so far.
For that reason, it's become common for people to look for an explanation of Lee's aggressiveness in some hidden quirk of his character, as though something of the fabled Light Horse Harry's reckless disposition had been passed on in the gene pool to his son. But Robert E. Lee's audacity on the offensive really sat at a considerable distance from just unreasoning instinct, just throwing the ball. And this was something which Lee himself explained to William Allen in the years after the war. No one, Lee said, no one who takes big chances and fails ever gets points afterwards for wisdom. Such criticism is obvious, Lee said, but the disparity of force between the contending forces rendered the risks unavoidable. And he admits that I look upon secession as anarchy and on slavery as so repellent that if I owned the 4 millions of slaves in the South, I would sacrifice them all to the Union. But all the same, though, we have come lately to doubt much of the Lee story. We've begun to entertain suspicions about his military capacity, because if there's one thing you don't do in American culture, it's lose. We have developed still more doubts about Lee's nobility of character, especially on the subject of race, since Lee never surrendered the Southern white belief in the inferiority of Black people as a race. In fact, we're not sure if we can speak of Robert E. Lee at all. And the rash of Lee statue topplings and removals since 2017, those are signs of how little privilege remains attached to the name of Robert E. Lee.
One other quick question. If Lee had one decision to take over again that would have been most significant, is there one?
I think there is. I think he would have revisited the decision to go to Richmond on April 22nd, 1861. I think if he had revisited that decision, his conclusion would have been simply to resign from the army and to adopt what we might call a neutral position. He would have resigned from the army and served neither the Union nor the Confederacy. And if he had done that, I probably would not be writing a biography of Robert E. Lee. And most of us would, if we knew the name Robert E. Lee, would know it only as a footnote to the genealogy of Light Horse Harry.